Have you ever experienced a glitch in the Matrix? If so, consider sending it my way. Just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to submit your story. And of course, thank you. I'll try not to be long-winded, but I need to provide a little backstory, so please, be patient. I was an opiate/heroin addict for about 6 to 7 years between 2008 and 2014. In October of 2014, I'd finally had enough and decided to check myself into the inpatient psychiatric unit at my local hospital so that I could detox myself quickly over about 3 to 5 days instead of having to go into another long-term addiction treatment center, which was usually about 30 to 60 days. By the time I got to this point in my journey of addiction, I was an IV heroin user and I was using a lot every day just to stay well or feel okay to go about my day. I know it's hard not to judge me and stop reading at this point, but I got run over by a car that my boyfriend was driving when I was 18 and just about to graduate high school. I ended up with a compound spiral fracture, meaning the bone broke through the skin, sorry for the visual, of my left leg's tibia bone because of the way the car wheel ran me over. Doctors put a titanium rod through the bone marrow, and they used 4 screws to keep it in place. 2 by my knee and 2 at my ankle. I was given a morphine drip plus 80 milligrams of OxyContin and Vicodin to take home. No cast. Just crutches and a few stitches after the drain was removed. And doctors told me nothing about the possibility of abuse or the risk of addiction with those medications. I was basically still a child, so of course I got hooked. Fast forward from 2007 now. It was 2014, and fentanyl was just starting to break through nationwide, and reports of overdoses skyrocketed around that time because it was getting mixed in with heroin. I live in Maryland, so I was getting my heroin from the deepest and shadiest parts of Baltimore City and dealing with some fairly high-level gangs. My dealer would often offer testers to me because I was a really good customer. The heroin that I bought from him always came in what was called caps, which were just emptied out and refilled reused vitamin capsules so the dealers could mix their product with other stuff and make more money. When my dealer offered me testers, I always took them, because it meant they were trying out a new, better product and, well, they were free. Free for an addict is like gold. On the day that I decided to go into detox, I went down to the city to pick up my last hurrah, so I could get high one last time right before going in to detox. My dealer had testers that day. A lot of them. I was used to doing about 10 to 30 caps throughout any given day, depending on what I could afford. On this day, he gave me 10 caps. So, I went straight into the emergency room prepared to use their restroom to get high one last time, and then check myself in. I did all 10 caps at once, though. I don't remember what happened after that. I don't remember even checking myself in, but when I woke up in what I now believe to be a parallel universe or alternate reality, meaning I'm pretty sure I overdosed and died in that bathroom that day, in my reality, because those testers were laced with fentanyl, which I'd never done before. I was sitting in a detox chair with IV fluids when the blackness faded. The person next to me was already talking to me when I opened my eyes and, quote-unquote, woke up. Like he was literally mid-sentence. When I looked over at him and said, "What?" He repeated himself, and I asked again, "No, what are you talking about?" Long story short, I felt like I had just been asleep because things went completely black for me after I used those 10 caps. But I eventually learned from my detox neighbor that he and I had been talking for at least an hour off and on, and that I never fell asleep once. He said he would have noticed because we talked to each other to keep our minds off the upcoming withdrawals. I had no memory of any conversations that we'd had, and I think he thought that I was just super high and didn't remember, but that is not, I repeat, not the case. Prior to that moment, I had an amazing memory. I was never even high enough in all my years of using to forget entire chunks of time, so I don't believe that's what happened. Anyway, moving on now to why I believe I shifted. And mind you, I'm finally sharing this because it's been ruminating in my mind since October of 2014. I walked into that emergency room completely addicted. Mentally and physically, to not only IV heroin, but the entire process of using. And I also smoked about a pack of cigarettes per day. Probably more. I was also clearly addicted to nicotine. When I woke up, I went through very short physical heroin withdrawals. Mentally, I didn't even understand why I ever wanted heroin in the first place. I also completely stopped smoking cigarettes from that moment on. I completely stopped wanting them and still to this day find them absolutely disgusting. I don't know if that means the me from this reality was less of an addict of heroin or even nicotine, or if I'm just crazy. But I feel like it's the former. I got straight A's in high school and graduated with honors even after my accident, so I assure you I am an intelligent, sane human being who is now a full-grown, 32-year-old adult. So immediately things felt off, and they felt off ever since. I, the me from the other reality, remember things that none of my family members remember. In fact, it became a running joke that I have a bad memory, but I have an amazing memory. I'm just remembering things that didn't happen in this reality. Another small example I can think of is that the boyfriend that I mentioned who ran me over, in my reality, my parents were furious with him and demanded that we break up even though it was an accident on his part. In this reality, my parents don't blame him, and talks of us breaking up was never mentioned. Then he overdosed and died. But here's the thing, yes, it's entirely possible that he just did too much, or whatever he used was also laced with fentanyl, even though it wasn't found in my toxicology report. But the boyfriend from my reality never would have done too much. He was terrified of using too much, so much so that he was one of the only few addicts I've ever known who had never once overdosed. Most addicts will overdose and then someone calls 911 and saves them. Many still die too, I know, but this just never sat right with me. Then his friends, who were my closest friends too, and I had a weird falling out, arguing over memories that I had, and they once again did not. We still don't talk about it to this day, and they were my boys in high school. My boyfriend and I had been dating for 11 years by the time he died, so his friends were like brothers to me, in my reality at least. And in my reality, those guys would have never left my side if my boyfriend died. They would have constantly checked in, made sure it was safe, etc. But in this reality, it seemed like we were never even that close. Again, maybe I misread things all of those years, but I doubt it. And there's at least a dozen more standout occurrences over the years, but this is long enough, and I do applaud you if you're still reading. Anyways, I wanted to get this off my chest and share it. Who knows? Maybe someone will have some insight into this. Or maybe I'll get called crazy. But yeah, that's the gist of it. Things in this world feel very unsettled for me since then. And I can't shake the feeling that I'm somehow in the wrong body. And I hate it. When I moved out for college, my grandma bought me a small dining table and chair set. I ended up using this table as my desk primarily, as me and my now husband don't care to eat meals at a table very often. So let's call it my desk table. 4 years of college ends, and we pack our stuff in one of those moving pods to store it for a couple of months, until we get to where we're moving across the country. We pack the desk table. We get to the new place. I had to start grad school right away. We couldn't move into our apartment yet, so we stayed in a hotel for 2 weeks. This was a super stressful time. Big move, starting grad school, no money, didn't have access to all my stuff that I needed, preparing for my first try at the PhD qualifying exam, etc. Super uncomfortable hotel bed with no desk in the room. I wasn't sleeping well. I couldn't study effectively on the bed, and I had a pretty crappy time. We finally get to the new apartment, and I'm eager to get the desk table set up so I can start studying more effectively. Turns out, the desk table is freaking broken. It has metal legs that screw into a wooden top, and the metal is so bent into deformed positions that it won't screw back together. Nothing would save it, and I lost my mind. It was like the straw that broke the camel's back on my sanity that day. I wouldn't have the money for a new desk table, and I could not believe that this was happening. I try to calm down. I take some more stuff down to the dumpster, and I can't believe what I see next. There, near the dumpster with a free sign on it, is freaking desk table. The exact freaking same desk table. The same, not similar, not close, the absolute same as mine. Identical. I run. Literally run back to my apartment and tell my now husband. No time to explain, come to the dumpster to help me get something and hurry. He's confused and alarmed, but when we get there, I can see it on his face and he just says, "What the hell?" I say, "I don't know and I don't care. Hurry, help me take it upstairs." We get this clone desk table, clean it, and I still use clone desk table to this day, 10 years later. I still live at the same place, and there is rarely free stuff like this at the dumpster. I've seen like one couch, a dresser, and a couple of gross mattresses in 10 years. I have no explanation for this to this day. This is literally the craziest freaking thing that has ever happened to me. I have no history of blackouts or mental illness that involve hallucinations or intense daydreaming, and I'm freaking the hell out. Like 30 minutes ago, I thought, I should do the little things I've been putting off but want to do. So I did. I remember so distinctly hanging one of my pieces of art on the wall. I picked it up from leaning on the edge of my bed, and I put it on a thumbtack. Afterwards, I set out all of my nail stuff and painted my hand and toenails. When I was trying to fix my pillow cover, I accidentally got some black nail polish on my pillow. When I'm done, I relax with Amy Winehouse in the background, scrolling aimlessly on Instagram. Next thing I know, My sister barges in and tells me my chicken tikka masala arrived. I go to shoo her away and catch a glimpse of my hand. My nails are pristinely blank. Like, no residue at all. I stare at it for a second like, what the hell? It took so long to paint. Then I look at my toes, and they're also completely blank. The only thing I could think was, how in the world did that happen? My hands were playing on my phone the entire time, so I start destroying my bed to find polish anywhere on my sheets, but nothing. At this point, I think I'm actually going mental as I'm putting my sheets back to where they were, patting the pillows and such. I start karate chopping the middle of the decor pillows. I did it to the last one, and my damn nail polish is on the side of it. Same place and everything. I leap off my bed, and when I step off, I kick something over. My body took a screenshot. I look down, and my freaking painting that I hung up above my desk is now at the side of my bed. I'm freaking the hell out. I think I'm going crazy, and I'm looking up symptoms and causes of blacking out or hallucinating. Can someone explain this to me? Is there something wrong? Hello. I wasn't sure whether to post this here or in Mandela Effect, but as far as I know, this isn't something affecting more than my partner and myself. Last night, my partner and I were watching TV, and I decided to put a sweater on. I go into the bedroom, and I pull out a sweater that we had bought at Meijer back in early fall of last year. I'd worn it several times, but hadn't in probably over a month at this point. I put it on and throw the hood over my head while thinking, I don't remember this having a hood. When I walk back into the living room, she says something about how much she loves that sweater, and I sit down next to her. We get into a conversation, leaving the TV paused and talk for several minutes before I interrupt with, I don't think the sweater had a hood when we bought it. Now, we have a running joke for all of the many times one of us will remember something that's completely different than it is, referencing the dubious theory of quantum immortality and fun. Whenever this happens to either of us, the other will reply with something along the lines of, "Uh-oh, how'd you die this time?" implying that our consciousness is in a new, slightly different universe because our clumsy asses died in the last one. So, I'm entirely ready for that kind of response to my observation. She laughs for a minute, but instead of asking me what killed me this time, she looks me up and down and says, "Yeah, no, it definitely didn't." We pause and think for a minute. I ask her what she remembers the top of the sweater looking like, and she tells me, without hesitation, that she clearly remembers it having a North Face style collar with the zipper going all the way up. I hadn't told her, but that was exactly what I remembered as well. Adding to the false memory is the fact that I know I've worn my coat over the sweater in the past, and that I have a particular way of flipping the hood out over the collar anytime I wear something with a hood under it. And I don't even remember having done that with this sweater. Usually, there's the rational thought in the back of my mind that I'm just not remembering something correctly. But this is the first time that both of us have remembered something being different in the exact same way. I had an existential crisis about it for several minutes before we could resume our show, and I still can't stop thinking about it. Well, I usually like to write a lot of fictional horror stories, and that kind of stuff. But the story is the exception. I have experienced all of this. This is one of my first memories. I was about 3 or 4 years old. I was in my aunt's home. She lived on the 3rd floor of an old apartment building in the downtown of my city. The rooftop was a place where all the tenants could hang out the laundry to sun-dry. You could access the rooftop by the main stairs of the building. The staircase entry in the rooftop was next to a little apartment that was originally built for the doorman, but it was always empty. There were always 2 doors. The one on the right takes you to the staircase, and the one on the left takes you to this little apartment. Well, that day, I went with my aunt to the rooftop to help her with the laundry. Everything was normal until I got out of the staircase and saw that we came from the wrong door. Now the staircase was in the left door. So I asked my aunt why and who moved the staircase to the other door. She was confused by my question, but didn't give me any importance. Other times that I went there with her, I asked the same, always referring to that day when I noticed that the staircase was in the wrong door. Now, speaking with my aunt about this, she tells me about that one random day that I went with her to the rooftop, and I mentioned the staircase position change. She was confused because I was so sure about what I was saying, but she didn't give any importance to my words, because the stairs were always in the left, even if I remembered them always in the right until that day. I've never had any brain problems or accidents, and my aunt and cousin remember me talking about the staircase being moved, and that something was very strange. If I transported to a parallel universe, this one, at this point I don't want to come back to my original one. I've made almost my whole life here, and I'm okay with it. So, my mom, my brother, and I moved into a new house in December. I spend most of my spare time in the kitchen as I love to eat, cook, and bake. And the photo attached might help you understand what my kitchen looks like and where the lights and light switches are. A couple of weeks ago, I went to turn the light on in the kitchen because I always walk down the hall and flick it as soon as I turn the corner, and it wasn't there anymore. I looked around on the wall and on the other side of the hall, and there was just a thermostat. I don't use the thermostat because I don't ever feel the need, so I wouldn't have mistaken it for that. Plus, I remember it being around the corner. I went to do it again tonight, out of habit, and I asked my mother if she remembers a light switch being there. And she said, "That's really weird. I was thinking the exact same thing. Probably just something with our brains adjusting from the old place." She doesn't really believe in stuff like glitches in the Matrix or parallel universes, so I just said, yeah, probably. But inside, I knew it wasn't because of that. My heart was racing and I was shaking a lot. I felt so weird about it. It couldn't have been because of the old place either, because we've been here for 3 months now, and the old place was nothing like this. I find it so scary that she agrees, but comforting that I'm not going crazy. The light switch for the kitchen is now a double switch with the dining room light over across the room by the sliding glass door. She doesn't remember that either. Edit, my best friend also remembers the light switch. We bake cupcakes together often. Also, I forgot to mention the light over the sink. It is its own separate switch, but I never used it much because it's not enough to light up the whole kitchen. When I was 15 or 16, my two younger brothers and I were playing in our family's living room. For some reason that I don't recall, our parents weren't there at the time, so we were basically playing dodgeball in the house only. Instead of the heavy rubber balls typically used in actual dodgeball, we were using one of the cheap, lightweight, inflatable rubber balls from Walmart. You know the type. Smaller than a standard basketball. I'm guessing it was between 12 to 14 inches in circumference. There was a grandfather clock positioned in one corner of the room that my mom still has to this day. It was positioned as close to the wall as possible. When you take into account the baseboard and shoe molding on the wall, plus the trim on the bottom of the clock, there couldn't have been more than a 4 to 5 inch gap between the body of the clock and the sheetrock wall. We were launching this ball at each other because no matter how hard you throw these, they don't hurt the other person. So I get the ball and throw it as hard as I can at my brother, who was standing in front of the clock. Just as the ball left my hand, I had this snapshot vision in my head of that ball lodging between the clock and the wall, and in slow motion, I watched my brother jump out of the way, and that 12-inch ball bury itself in the 4-inch space between the clock and the wall, just like it had happened in my mind a split second before. I don't mean a little either. Nearly half of the ball was lodged. It was difficult to pull free. All three of us stopped and were blown away by what had just happened. It had to be a 1 in 10 million shot. I'm fairly certain that I could try to do it again for the rest of my life, and would likely never be able to do it again. I traveled back in time approximately 15 minutes this morning. As the title says, this happened this morning. I have a job where I work the graveyard shift from 4 a.m. until I'm done with my work. There was a Valentine's Day rush, so I didn't get out until around 6:30. I went back to my apartment to catch another hour or two of sleep before my 9 o'clock class. I live within close walking distance, so I set my alarm for 8:40. 8:40 rolls around, and my alarm goes off. I always put my phone underneath my pillow so that I feel the vibrations against my face. When I picked up my phone to turn it off, I noticed a few notifications from my friend, A, messaging me on Instagram, and dated 14 minutes ago. I pressed snooze on my alarm for another 10 minutes of sleep, figuring I can still make my class if I hurry. I live about 10 minutes away, but I was still in my work clothes. The snoozed alarm goes off, and I was still tired as hell, so I decided not to go and to text my friend about it later to make sure I didn't miss anything important. I put my phone down by my legs when I was done, silencing my alarm. More time passes, and another alarm goes off. I'm confused because I don't have another alarm after my initial one to wake up and go to class. I grabbed my phone, which was still by my legs, and I saw that it was 8:40 again. I'm still super tired at this point, so it took me a minute to fully realize what had happened. I was hesitant at first to actually wake up because some crazy crap just happened, but I don't want to mess with whatever made it happen. After a few minutes, I figured that the universe had given me a second chance to get to class, so I got up. On my way to class, I was thinking about it some more, and I was about to chalk it up to a weird dream that I had already woken up. But then I remembered my Instagram messages from A. I didn't see the notifications when I woke up the second time, so I checked my DMs. Sure enough, A messaged me at 8:26, 14 minutes before 8:40 when I initially woke up. So that, my friends, was this Monday's Glitch in the Matrix collection. Some interesting stories. A lot of objects changing, which are always bizarre stories. But then we've also had a couple people who apparently seem to think they've gone into different existences, parallel universes, if you will, which are, again, in my opinion, really bizarre stories. Obviously, I've never experienced anything like this, so I can't really give my opinion or thoughts on these experiences. I just know that they're weird. They are absolutely weird. And I appreciate everyone who lets me use their stories, as well as those who submit their stories directly to me at astheravendreams.com. Really, really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this collection of stories, please consider hitting that little thumbs up button. Please also consider leaving me a comment, letting me know your thoughts, or the word of the week, which will come up here momentarily. And if you're new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. Help the channel grow. It means the absolute world to me. You have no idea. You can also further support the channel by going to Patreon or clicking the join button down below, links in the description, where for $1 a month you can get early access to content like this. Alright, moving on to this week's word of the week. Last week, the word of the week was merge. M-E-R-G-E. So, several of you, I say several, quite a bit of you, left me comments with the word merge, and I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. These were some awesome comments. I know a lot of people just like to leave simple sentences, but please do feel free to leave me a couple sentences worth of a story if you ever want to. But again, all of these, amazing. Thank you so very much. Plus, it helps the channel a lot. So, moving on from last week's word of the week, we're going to switch it up a bit. And I can say that this time, because this week's word of the week is switch. S-W-I-T-C-H. An exchange or swap, especially one done secretly, a transference or shift as of opinion or attention. It's also a device used to break or open an electrical circuit or to divert current from one conductor to another. That sentence was hard to say, like a light switch, basically. It's also a console by Nintendo. If you have a Nintendo Switch and want to use your Nintendo Switch in your story, go for it. As long as you just use the word Switch, that's the only requisite. So, alright friends, thank you so much for listening to this point. I hope you're all having a beautiful day. I hope you all know that you are loved, you are valid, you are important. Never, ever let anyone tell you otherwise. And of course, until next time, sleep well.